She won most talkative in high school, and she has been running her mouth ever since. Welcome to the Lisa Fisher Said podcast with your host, Lisa Fisher.
Okay, I love it when a doctor has kind of switched gears and left, not to say you've left your roots, but it looks like from your social media, I got a lot in common with you, except I'm not smart, but I'm very inquisitive and I love the way you think. And part of your journey is weight loss. Part of your journey is the research you did with COVID. And I don't even know where to start. Let's start with the weight loss portion of this because, we don't want to have a fat doctor because a fat doctor is sending the wrong message. You're now a slim doctor, but tell me when Christine was a little fluffier.
Well, thank you for the introduction. And you're right. I haven't completely left my roots. I've kind of just expanded them.
Yeah.
But yes, and I feel like everyone kind of becomes an expert in something that they've had a personal journey through. And so,
Right.
yes, I used to be overweight. I was an obese teenager and I
Wow.
lost weight over 30 years ago on a fluke diet that I decided to do while fasting. And so at the time,
Wait, you
intermittent
knew the
fasting.
term fasting?
Well, what I did was I was kind of experimenting. I was 15 years old. It was the summer of my 10th grade, and I decided I needed to lose the weight. And I started eating a healthy diet with counting calories. And then I started noticing if I actually eat the same amount of calories, but in a shorter time period, I was able to lose a little faster. And so I did that summer.
Unbelievable.
It was kind of a
Unbelievable
fluke
that you
thing.
made the connection.
Well, the funny thing is I didn't make the actual scientific connection until I went to medical school, and it was there that I got that aha moment that like, wow, this is actually why that worked. So, yes, I was overweight. I lost a lot of weight as a teenager, and then I lost a little bit more after medical school, just kind of learning all these pathways and fasting. And even then, I graduated medical school almost 30 years ago. And even back then, people thought I was crazy because I wasn't necessarily starving myself. I was just eating during certain time periods. And so now that everything is very trendy towards intermittent fasting, I get to say, I told you so.
You really
But
do.
yeah, it's been the best thing I've ever done in my life, and I attribute the fact that I'm 53 and I have no health problems as a result of just doing intermittent fasting for so many years.
I say it all the time. And Jen Stevens, prolific author now because she's publishing another book, but she's a layperson who's obviously learned a lot about fasting. Says we come for the weight loss, but we stay for the health benefits. And
Absolutely.
that goes back to the word that I bet. I mean, I say this. I never heard about insulin till I started fasting in 2017, and then Dr. Bickman has taught us so much, and Dr. Fung has taught us so much. But were you talking about insulin 30 years ago in medical school, or were you still doing the calories in? You had to be doing calories in, calories
Yeah.
out.
So I was doing calories in, calories out. However, when I was studying biochemistry, I started to learn about glycogenolysis and gluconeogenesis, and
Yeah.
those two terms involved insulin. And so, in a way, I was like, yeah, this is meant to be. Our body is
Hmm.
equipped with backup systems because our ancestors didn't have uh, Whole Foods and Trader Joe's. They had to actually go out and find their food. So their body was smart and it was built and equipped for survival. And survival means that, yes, you have to have backup systems. So, yes, I did learn those in biochemistry. And that's what really kind of piqued my interest. But yes, insulin, it's been around for as long as we have. And insulin is actually what I say is insulin is like your body's first warning to you. Because, when your levels drop, that's actually when you feel hungry, right? So insulin is a transporter for glucose into cells. And so when you don't eat, your body doesn't know what's going on. It just needs fuel. So it's trying to figure out, am I going to get fuel from Christine eating externally, whatever sources it's giving me, or am I going to get fuel in other ways? And so what it does is when your insulin levels drop is when you actually feel hungry. So you can do one of two things. You either respond when you're hungry and eat, or you tell your body, I'm not eating, and then your body figures out, okay, she doesn't have access to food.
Hmm.
I'm going to step into backup plan number one, which is burning that glycogen. And then backup plan number two is when it's done with that glycogen burning, it goes to fat burning. And this is where everybody loves fasting, right? Because it's when we start to burn fat and we lose weight, but it's really our body's survival mechanism. And we're built to actually fuel better on ketones, as you know already.
Yes,
So, yes.
yes. I just had a client because I am a certified health coach, and she has lost, and her arms were folded, was saying, "This fasting thing is silly. I'm just going to do it for the time, for the few months that I'm meeting with you, and then I'm going to go back to eating longer because my family has a lot of social activities and all that." Almost mad at me. And now
Mm,
she's 2 months in, and she's dropped about 16 pounds, and she's really close to her goal weight, or she doesn't know what her goal weight is, right? But she got her lab work back, and her doctor fussed at her because her cholesterol jumped up because she is eating more fat.
yeah.
She's not eating carbs, right? And so and I can't give medical advice, but she reached out to me yesterday and read me all this, and she said, "He's about to put me on statins," you know. So I love it when people, this is when the internet's a good thing. She could find
Yeah.
some science backing up that her rapid weight loss caused her liver to do what it's supposed to do. She eats a 20 and 4 schedule every day. So she fasts for 20 hours, feasts for 4. And we know that the liver does an amazing thing when we're fasting. It makes cholesterol, which helps
Hmm.
vitamin D synthesis. It helps our sex hormones communicate. All these things because she's feeling so good. She was like, "Why don't I feel bad with a cholesterol 300?" I went, "Because you're not sick." I mean, but I love that because she almost was saying, "What am I going to do?" Well, of course, I say fire your provider, but not everyone wants to do that. And I respect that. But you're the customer, and then the customer always, I just want someone that
Yeah.
works with me, the customer. But I loved it that she found the research that said rapid weight loss, which I'd say 15 pounds in 2 months is pretty impressive, or whatever it is,
Yeah.
was rapid, and that she did make some more cholesterol. Is she on the right path with that?
Yeah, and that's a really good question. So what I tell my patients is your ultimate goal is ketosis, right? So ketosis is the best fuel for your brain, it's the best fuel for your cells. However, the way you induce ketosis does make a difference. And so I know a lot of people will eat a very high fat, high protein keto diet to get into
Yeah.
ketosis. And while that, yes, that does lead to weight loss, and sometimes it leads to rapid weight loss, and exactly what you mentioned, the high levels of cholesterol. What I like to induce is ketosis through fasting. And it's basically providing the same thing, which is ketones, right? You want that fat burning. But the way that you induce ketosis through fasting is, yes, you're restricting your times of eating, but you're able to eat a little bit more of a variety. So what I prefer, and the reason why I prefer this is, we'll talk a little bit more about this, is because of your gut health. So yes,
Yeah.
high fat, high protein keto diets are great for weight loss. They're great for, allowing you to just get rid of excess weight. But in the long term, they're not great for gut health, because our gut bacteria, those
Oh,
beneficial bacteria that we have, they love fiber, and they love fermented foods, and they love
I see.
feeding on plant-based fiber. So those have carbs, right? So it's not necessarily limiting carbs, it's limiting bad carbs. And so
Hmm.
what I say is, yes, if you want to lose weight on a high fat, high protein keto diet, try it for a month and then switch over, because ultimately also those kind of diets are not sustainable, right? If we deprive ourselves of anything, we're always going to want to go back to it. So the way that I like to induce ketosis is through, and we should relabel intermittent fasting, because a lot of people think it's starvation, which it's not at all. We should relabel it to intermittent eating. So you're eating during a 6 to 8 hour
Right.
period, right?
Yeah.
You're eating during a 6 to 8 hour period. So you're getting all the nutrients you need. You make sure that you're eating enough plant-based fibers. I love foods like asparagus, lentils, onions, things like that, because those are really the type of fibers that our beneficial bacteria love. And this, in my opinion, is what differentiated the people who may have gotten a lot sicker during COVID, because we've heard of people who were, quote unquote, looking really healthy, right? And I'm probably going to get a lot of heat by saying this, but the bodybuilder types, the types that were very strict, very high fat keto diets, well, they probably didn't have a lot of that beneficial bacteria that protected children and that protected other people from severe COVID, because that bacteria itself regulates immune pathways that COVID affected. So I don't want to say that, but you really want to induce ketosis through fasting and not ketosis in the long term through a high fat,
Okay.
high protein
I-
keto diet.
Yeah, the problem with that is, truthfully, a high fat diet is so satisfying. It My satiety levels are so high that I have. So for you to say this, I've got all the fermented foods in my refrigerator. It's just by the time I have the steak and eggs, I don't want anything else. So
Yeah.
maybe I'll back off on some of the steak and eggs. Is this where the Akkermansia comes in? Am I saying that right?
Yeah.
That term?
Yeah. So Akkermansia is one of the bacteria that's actually been found to be higher levels in thinner individuals. So there, people who are thin have higher levels of Akkermansia than people who are overweight, who are usually deficient in Akkermansia. But
Wow.
more importantly than Akkermansia is bifidobacterium, because bifidobacterium, in my opinion, is king of the gut.
Okay.
And so going back to what you were saying about the steak and eggs, there's nothing wrong with eating the steak and eggs, but have the steak with some, fruits like berries
Okay.
or, a lot of combination. And so what we've seen in the gut is there's a gut bacteria called Firmicutes. So
Oh, I don't know
Firmicutes,
that one.
yeah, so Firmicutes, it's kind of, it's funny because we don't really know everything about the gut, but Firmicutes is one of those bacteria that's kind of labeled as a bad guy. But what we found is it's okay to have a little bit of Firmicutes. If you have too high Firmicutes and too low bifidobacterium, that's when the gut starts to look a little bad. And Firmicutes is usually found in people who eat a lot of meat, a lot of like high fat protein
Oh,
diets.
okay.
So I'm a believer in eat everything you want, just eat it during a time period and have a variety. So yes, have the steak, have the eggs, have whatever, but just have some vegetables and berries and foods like lentils and things like that along with it, so that you're feeding your bacteria. Because a lot of times you're feeding yourself, but you're feeding your gut, and you're feeding those guys, the good guys in your gut, like bifidobacterium, Akkermansia, and lactobacillus, which are the three actually really big ones in the gut that are known to be beneficial.
So you like getting those from foods rather than supplements, the Akkermansia and the bifidobacterium.
Yeah, it's always better to get them from food, because number one is they like the food better, right? The bacteria want to eat food too, like we want to feed them.
Yep.
But also, what happens is when you eat plant-based fibers, like the ones that I mentioned that are inulin rich, and inulin is a great fiber because it feeds the bacteria, but we are not able to digest it. What happens is our bacteria, believe it or not, send the same kind of satiety signals to our brain that are released or are affected, at least, when people are injected with the peptides that are now being given to everybody: semaglutide, Ozempic, all of those. Those are called the GLP-1 receptors.
Right.
Those are what are affected, which are receptors that help to slow down the motility in the gut. Well, believe it or not, when our beneficial bacteria are fed the foods that they love, they actually affect these receptors in the same way. And they also release these other peptides that affect our brain and tell our brain we're satisfied. So you can kind of get that satiety from eating these foods.
So that's the chicory, the green bananas, the resistant
By
starch rice.
yes, a little bit of rice. I say a little bit of everything, but foods exactly with inulin rich. So asparagus, bananas, onions, what a chicory root is a really good one also. Lentils, they all feed the good guys in the gut.
How do you measure gut health, and do we need a diagnostic test to see what bacteria we have, or does it matter?
Yes and no. So when I do my evaluations for gut health, I'll look at what you're having symptoms of, right? So if you're telling me all these symptoms that are related to leaky gut, like bloating after you eat, or just really having a hard time losing weight, even though you're dieting, or if you say you have acne, there are all these little symptoms, or a new allergy, for example. That's a big one. Oh, I started to get allergic to nuts. I was never allergic to nuts before. or all of a sudden I'm lactose intolerant. Those to me are kind of key clues that tells me that your gut lining is probably not as healthy as it was once before, and it's kind of becoming leaky, where it's allowing these toxins to leak into the bloodstream. So that I might not necessarily need a gut evaluation. I like to look at the gut in the stool analysis because it kind of gives me a bigger picture. And we've evolved really well in looking at gut species. And what the gut tests that I use do is they tell me what's the firmicutes ratio that we talked about? Is it very high? And is that something that's unhealthy? Are you someone that's very deficient in Akkermansia or bifidobacterium, for example? And those are usually found in people who are usually overweight. There's a
Mm.
reason why, because they're not there. Or people who are deficient in lactobacillus, for example. Lactobacillus is another really good one that may make people prone to, for example, yeast infections, because that helps with, the maintaining and the integrity of the vaginal lining, for example. So there's so many functions that our bacteria do. So I do like to look, because a lot of times symptoms that you're having are related to what's going on in your gut.
So we could go a step further. Insulin is definitely a player because of insulin's role as a fat storing hormone. But for
Yes.
especially the postmenopausal woman who I see all the time, who I lived that life, and she's saying, but I am fasting at, this is, 19 and 5, and I don't eat a lot of unnecessary carbs. Then you dig deeper and start thinking, well, let's talk to your gut.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to look at hormone levels, right? Because those levels also affect your gut. So there's so many different factors, but ultimately, if your gut is not healthy, and especially also if you're somebody who's stressed or not getting enough sleep,
Mm-hmm.
your body's going into survival mode again, and that happens to a lot of women who are going through menopause, right? They're not able to get a full night's sleep. And when you're not getting a full night's sleep, it tells your body that you're under stress, and your body
Mm-hmm.
sees that stress as something that it needs to protect.
Mm-hmm.
Survival, right? Our body's ultimate goal is survival. So what does it do? It starts releasing these different hormones that almost help us kind of like store fat, right?
Mm-hmm.
So ghrelin is one of those.
Mm-hmm.
Ghrelin's, it just starts kind of storing fat.
Mm-hmm.
Cortisol is also another fat storer. Insulin helps to store fat too. And all of those things kind of work together. So we look at a patient as a whole. We look at all the different factors and we try to address each factor, because again, we're looking at how the body's responding to survival. And then we help our body by adjusting those different factors.
I took care of my aunt remotely. I had, she was now in a nursing facility at 99. Never taken an aspirin, never had a doctor. The only doctor she had was the guy who did her facelift. So, I mean, just lived a clean, healthy life, did yoga every day, but finally broke her hip and she was only about 86
Mm,
pounds. Um,
yeah.
but she was like a second mother to me. And so when the nursing home called in August and said, your aunt's not doing well, I cannot tell you the hunger waves that came on me, and I never have
Mm,
them.
mhm.
I had a craving all of a sudden for comfort foods. And I was like, simmer down there, cortisol and ghrelin, everybody go home. But isn't that interesting
Yeah.
that if
Yep.
I sometimes wear a glucose monitor, but I hadn't in a while. Um,
Mhm.
I would love to have seen it because a friend of mine was doing her glucose monitor. She eats about 20 and 4 is her feasting and fasting window, and she's lost 81 pounds, and
Wow.
she's very impressive. But her daughter was like, I was in a car accident, and the mom, she had to go testify at this trial. So she
Yeah.
had it on, hadn't eaten in 22 hours, and her blood glucose, because we know that has a connection to your insulin, it's separate, was at like 150. And she goes, I haven't eaten in a day.
Mm,
And I was like,
mhm.
that dastardly insulin and that dastardly cortisol, isn't it part of the same kind of domino effect?
Absolutely. It is. The pathways are very similar. The stress pathways for our body that makes cortisol, they go along with the same pathways that make a lot of really important hormones. So your body, again, its ultimate goal is survival. It puts protection of itself as its number one goal. It doesn't care that you haven't slept, for example. But I've been in the same situation with you. If I haven't slept for a couple of days, I'm
Yes.
famished. And it's because
Yes.
my body doesn't know. It's just thinking, oh, is she under stress and she's not able to have access to food? I better store just in case. Who knows
Hmm.
what's happening? So, and this is something that we've kind of just recently discovered. So, it's a lot of factors that affect it. It's not just one
I
factor.
I did morning radio for years, and those are the people who come in, dark 30, it's 4:35 a.m. in the building. People are scurrying, and my hunger levels were so much higher when I worked in
Mm,
radio than when
mm-hmm.
now that I have a shift where I get up at 5:45 when my body wakes up, or 6 a.m. when the sun comes up.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
and we were reading, so that was like I did it for years, but that's the first time we had seen, or I had seen, that it said morning radio and TV people, medical students, or anyone night shift or shift
Ex-
workers had higher levels of type 2 diabetes, heart disease, weight gain. And we used to laugh. We'd say, "Oh, it's because there were pastries in the break room." Well, I didn't eat the pastries in the break room.
Yeah.
I never felt good even before I knew about fasting. I didn't know I was opening my window, but in the morning eating
Yeah.
sugar, because it would make
Yep.
me, I'd feel nauseated. I'd get the headache. What goes up must come down. It was not worth it to me. So I remember thinking, I don't eat the pastries in the break room. I wasn't a coffee drinker, so I didn't do the cream and the sugar and all that. And I did sip on stevia all day. I thought I was righteous with my 0 calories. But that was the first time, and it may have been 20 years ago, that I started seeing. So we just laughed and said, that's because med students have the pastries in their break room, or so and so. No, it has
It's the
sleep is
nighttime.
yeah,
Yeah.
sleep is
Yeah.
magical.
Yes. And they've done studies on night shift workers and they get enough sleep during the day, but apparently it's that being awake at night that your body sees as a stress response, right? Why is she awake at night? She should be asleep. And so that's where that release of cortisol, that extra release of cortisol happens. And then your body sees it again as a survival mechanism. Hold on to that glucose, hold on to that fat. And so, yes, you're right. They're more likely to develop type 2 diabetes, insulin resistance. So,
Isn't that
I,
interesting? Also, you wonder about people above the northern hemisphere, that don't see daylight
yeah.
and then see 24 hours of no twilight. A doctor once told me that twilight was that's why people in the ICU get that ICU psychosis.
Mhm.
He told me the brain needs
Mm,
twilight. I've never forgotten that.
mhm.
So then how do people mitigate? I guess it's just their lives. They just realize for the next 3 months we won't see daylight, or the next 3 months we won't see nighttime.
Yeah. Well, and you bring up an interesting point. I think I read somewhere that people who live in northern hemispheres, especially like the northern US and Canada, have higher
Yeah.
incidences of autoimmune diseases as well.
Isn't
Because for
that
some reason,
interesting?
yeah, there might be a link. I mean, a lot of the development of autoimmune is also related to leaky gut. It's kind of like your gut starts to release these
Oh.
toxins that your body doesn't recognize, and those toxins kind of stimulate the immune system to release these immune responders, right? And then it doesn't recognize them as part of them, and they think that maybe that's a factor for the development of autoimmune disease. And then,
Wow.
conversely, you look at continents like Africa, who have the lowest incidence of colon cancer, and you start to wonder why, right? They probably don't have access to medical care like we do here
Or
in the
clean
US,
water. They
or
they
clean
drink poop
water.
water.
Yes, exactly. But I think the factors are they probably eat a lot more fiber than we do. And
Mhm.
they're exposed to the sun a lot more. So their vitamin D levels
Mhm.
aren't as low as they are, here in the US, especially in the northern US. So definitely I feel like you can learn a lot about medicine and health by looking at demographics all around the world.
I
So
I absolutely can see that. One thing I've
yeah.
done to mitigate my own vitiligo, because I've kind of reversed most of my autoimmune conditions through fasting and just the way I eat. But this
Yeah.
darn vitiligo, I mean, it's just the thing that just drives me absolutely nuts, because it's,
I didn't notice it at all. Yeah.
yeah, until I showed you, because I cover it on my face.
Hmm.
And I didn't get it till I was almost 40. And it's the same time my Hashimoto's was diagnosed.
Mm.
So, I do a deep dive on all these studies, and I did find a study. Um, she asked me, the dermatologist, when I asked her, she asked me what some factor was. Like, I can't remember the term, but she was like, is it a legitimate study? I go, I don't know. I found it on the internet.
Yeah.
And so I talked somebody into who prescribes things for me. It's 250,000 units of vitamin D a week. And then like 6 or 8 milligrams of copper a day. So we
Mhm.
broke up the 250 milligrams and I do 50,000 units. This is not medical advice, people. I did 50,000 units 5 days a week. Went back, had my levels checked because I do work hard, but because of vitiligo, my receptors are a little wonky, right? My vitamin
Yeah.
D
Yeah.
receptors. It has to do
Yeah.
with all that because I always say this. My husband gets the same amount of sun because we go outside every day for 20 minutes, no sunscreen. He's from European descent, so he's got blue eyes, blonde hair, and he just absorbs that vitamin D. My
Mhm.
Russian Jewish vitamin, doesn't do it as much, just so mine was at 45. Still, it's
Mm.
okay.
It's
It
not
got to
bad. Yeah.
50. Yeah, it's not bad. It was
Yeah.
at 50, but I'm
Yeah.
saying I work hard. So I
Yeah.
bumped up with all this vitamin D and it got a little high. She gets at 120 now. I'm bringing it down, but I tell you one thing, I've got the energy of a 15-year-old. I
Wow.
cannot tell you what it's done for my energy, my outlook on life. Never, and I'm a Hashimoto's patient, a lot of silly autoimmune conditions. I have no symptoms of anything. So there's got to be something. And of course, I do not recommend anything over 120 for your vitamin D levels. And I'm bringing it back down. But have you seen a correlation between energy levels and kind of a high elevated vitamin D?
I think vitamin D definitely plays a role. I feel it too when I supplement with vitamin D. I definitely feel it. I think the other thing that might be contributing to that is if you're fasting,
Oh,
because
yeah, for sure.
again, your body's so smart when you're fasting, it gets rid of all these extra cells that it doesn't need, right? And so you're left with
Yeah.
these healthy, new, energetic cells. And so it kind of rejuvenates your immune system. So I think a combination of vitamin D and intermittent fasting are probably what's doing it. The other one that I really like and I think makes a difference for people is magnesium, because I think 80%
I
of the
love magnesium.
it's my favorite thing. Every
Oh,
time anyone in my family asks me something, I say, take some magnesium.
I
My
agree.
husband, he runs. He's like, I feel very tired. I'm like, and then now he gets to the point where he's like, I know what
I
you're going to
know.
say,
Yeah.
magnesium.
Right.
But and I don't recommend magnesium as a blanket treatment for everyone, because some people with, kidney function that's not optimized could not necessarily get rid of excess magnesium. So it's not something you should just take without talking to your doctor. But
Okay.
I think 80% of the population is magnesium deficient and they probably don't even know it. And even if they do tests, it probably doesn't show, because the magnesium that we're testing for is the magnesium that we're testing outside the cells. And when that becomes deficient
Oh,
outside the cells, that means it's really bad. That means the inside of the cell has drawn the magnesium from outside the cell into the cell to replete. And that's
got
when
it.
they call it extracellular magnesium. That's when it actually shows
Uh-huh.
up in blood work that is deficient. But most of the time, you're already deficient. If you're running, if you're exercising, just everyday activities that we're
Mhm.
doing make us magnesium deficient. So I take magnesium. I take actually 1,000 milligrams of magnesium every single day. And it's what my body needs. Somebody else might not need as much. But a telltale sign of that is like if you start getting cramps in your legs, or you're just getting headaches, or just not sleeping, magnesium does wonders, and it's probably that you're deficient in magnesium. So,
Yeah, people think you need 19 bananas, it's potassium. I always say no, it's magnesium. I
yeah.
really think now Bioptimizers even does a sleep breakthrough, which is a powder form, but it has a flavor. So I'm not going to take it as an intermittent faster because I don't want to break my fast at 9 o'clock at night. But for
Yeah.
some people they're just, I would say the sleep monster of perimenopause is kind of the beginning of the downward trajectory of, then you start having crazy periods, you start hating your family, which is really scientific. Everyone thinks I would like any other family but y'all. And then it comes back. I'm back. I love these people again. But there were a few
Yeah.
years that I was just
Yeah.
sour. I mean, all
Yeah.
I could do was be delightful on the radio, and then I had to come home and go. But magnesium has really pulled me through. Of this, I mean, there's several types. Bioptimizers does have the 7 types in it. And then I sometimes do magnesium 3 and 8 separately. But what are some of your go-tos? Because they all have different functions.
Yeah. For me, citrate works really well, but again, like you said, it depends on what you're taking it for.
Yeah.
If you have a lot of headaches, 3 and 8 might be a better option for you. It really depends. People with
Yeah.
muscle aches and, for example, people with chronic constipation, magnesium citrate or glycinate are great for that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I have so many patients and so many just even friends that I tell them, they're like, oh, I'm constipated. I'm like, just take magnesium every day and you'll see what a difference it makes. And they're like,
For Yeah,
wow, why didn't my doctor tell me about this? I'm like, I don't know.
I know. But you
So
are their doctor. So you can say, I am your doctor. Now go take it.
yeah. Yeah, no, I think it's funny because people are kind of starting to be a little bit turned off by traditional allopathic medicine, but they still want the advice from a doctor.
They
So I
do.
guess I'm kind of in a position where like I have that background, but I'm not like pushing medications all the time. So maybe they trust me a little bit more.
Yeah.
But I think we need to be a little bit more mainstream in yes, okay, medications have their place. There's nothing wrong with
Yeah,
that.
for sure.
But our body is so smart. Our body knows what it needs, and it kind of gives us symptoms to tell us, "Hey, I might need this. I might need that." So, it's fine. Just talk to your body. Know how to respond to your body.
Well, it's learning to listen to your body because I always say it doesn't whisper, it kind of shouts.
Yeah.
And
Well, first
that's
it
why I've
whispers, right?
yeah, that's right. That's
Yeah.
right. But
Yeah.
sometimes that's why I think I've gravitated toward a style of eating that gives me high satiety. But I do want I'm definitely going to start incorporating some of these things for my gut bacteria. And I haven't ignored it. I just, again, that satiety factor is so high in the way I eat. But I would love a banana and asparagus, some lentils and fiber. I mean, I'm not
Yeah.
against it.
And those will fill you up too, and then they'll really satisfy your guys in your gut, the bacteria and gals. So, because you're
How
really feeding
if
them.
you Yes, if you, let's say you do some GI map test or the stool testing or whatever you're doing, how often should you check that to see if you've improved?
I really kind of base it on the patient's symptoms more. I don't necessarily gauge the test. To me, the test is more of a confirmation of what's going on. So usually I'll do it once, an initial, and then if they're feeling better, I don't need to do another one because I'm pretty sure that what's going on in the gut is reflective of what they're feeling. But if somebody's not really having an improvement, I could check it again, but I don't normally. So I don't use it as a, like, oh, it's the
Yeah.
the go-to. I kind of just use it as
Hmm.
a supplement to what I'm thinking is going on. And maybe kind of
Well,
giving me clues
data.
something else. Yeah, something else that might be going on.
Yeah.
So, um
The other thing that really throws a wrench in everything we're talking about is that after 40 and perimenopause, as our hormones, or sex hormone, I mean, we have about 50 hormones, but our sex hormones are so valuable in everything we do, from the sleep, from the gut to the pooping. I mean, on and on and on and on, that
yeah.
you really have to chase that rabbit too. When do you start asking women, have you done the saliva test, or have you done a Dutch test, or has anyone looked at your hormones? When do you start looking at that? Late 30s, early 40s, or later than that?
Yeah, when they start having symptoms of perimenopause,
Mm-hmm.
menopause, 40s and 50s. Usually they don't really kind of put the two and two together until when they've entered menopause or
I
just
know.
after, and they're like, I feel like crap. And I'm like, yeah, you've probably been having all these issues from before and not realizing it. So the earlier the better. I mean, obviously I have patients who are in their 30s or 20s and have gut issues too. So it really depends. But in the younger ones, the telltale signs are acne. They come in with acne and they're like, I can't get rid of acne and I don't know what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, do you have gut issues too? And they're like, actually, yes. So it really depends on the person. My my goal is to treat the person uniquely because we are so different, right?
Mm-hmm.
And and I'm not opposed to anyone going on a specific diet. Like, I know a lot of people who do really well on a vegan diet. It's not the type of diet for me, but then I just kind of support them in their dietary requirements. But I think for the majority of people that aren't completely, averse to any diet, the Mediterranean diet, in my opinion, is the best. It
Yeah.
incorporates a little bit of everything, and that's really what
Yes.
our bodies were kind of made from. But I'm not opposed to someone who says, you know what, I'm strictly vegan because this is what I really feel better on. I support them in their journey, and there's nothing wrong with that. But yeah, processed foods and alcohol, those are probably the two elephants in the room.
Right.
You know,
That has the
unfortunately.
most money behind it.
Yes, absolutely. It's interesting that you say that because somebody just sent me an article about how stores like Walmart and the big chains are now responding to so many people being on the semaglutides. So they're actually making these protein powders that are very, I know,
Oh my
very
gosh.
high in, yeah, exactly, like rich carbohydrate and calorie powder, so that it helps somebody who's on this kind of diet be full. And it's interesting because yes, the companies and the big, food companies are responding to whatever the trend is. So it's
Well, we are
interesting.
recording this in December, and it's expected at the end of the month that we're going to have doctors will be able to write the GLP-1 agonists easily with the new drug that is should be
The
released
oral,
before the end of the
yeah.
year. Yeah, and I'm afraid it's the fen of the '90s, but I could be wrong. You
I
know,
say that all the time. Every time someone asks me, "What do you think?" I say, "Remember Fen from the '90s?" I said,
you
"This is
do.
the new
Yeah,
Fen."
yeah,
And again, I'm not opposed to them. If you're a diabetic, you actually might need them. Let's save these for
right,
the diabetics that need these medications. If
right,
you're somebody who's morbidly obese and has so many health problems, you
right.
might actually need these medications. I'm not opposed to them. I'm just opposed to them being a blanket treatment for anybody that just wants to lose weight. Because what's going to happen is you're going to lose the weight and then you're not addressing the root cause of your weight gain. So what's going to happen? We all know.
Right, and it
So
goes back to gut bacteria. So do those GLP-1 agonists in any way destroy I mean, are they Advil to your stomach? Are they, birth control pills destroy your gut? I mean, think about all those
yeah,
things. Is there anything in those that make you a little nervous for the person taking them because of their gut health?
definitely a little nervous for the person taking them. I haven't seen any studies linking them affecting the gut bacteria specifically, but what I have seen is that the one of the ways they work is they delay gastric emptying, right? So they kind of keep you
Right,
full a little bit longer because the food is not absorbed as fast as it normally would
right,
be. And I've seen people who have, paralysis of their vagus nerve,
right.
and then they have issues. Or I've even heard anesthesiologists comment on the fact that patients going into surgery, they're finding a lot of them are having aspiration because what they
I
thought
can
was an
see
empty
that.
stomach, they say don't eat, right? Don't eat after 8 p.m., for example, before your surgery.
Yes.
Well, if you're on one of these medications, the emptying of all the food contents is happening a lot slower, and they've seen that some people still have stuff in their stomach, food, and that's
Like
affecting
gastroparesis, right? Like
gastroparesis.
mhm.
Exactly. Yeah. And I've seen other studies that
Hmm.
show long-term use has been linked to thyroid cancer,
Oh,
pancreatitis. Yeah. So, again, if you're just somebody who needs to lose a little bit of weight and you don't really have any other risk factors, maybe think about, using something else. So, but
I
yeah,
have a rare swallowing disorder. You've probably heard of it but many people haven't. Achalasia,
achalasia. Yeah.
and yes, and it's very similar to gastroparesis, and that it's because for everybody listening, get your anatomy books out. My lower esophageal sphincter does not open and close properly. Lived with it again. I've reversed it pretty much. Like I don't fit the clinical definition anymore, but I
Hmm.
know anytime if I had to go under, I mean, I don't go under, but even for if I have an upper GI, well, he knows because he's an advanced clinician, GI doc. But one time I was having a little facial procedure done and they were just going to Versed or something. And I went to aspirate, and the guy doing
Mm,
it said, at least I know you haven't eaten in 20 hours because I'm an
mm.
intermittent faster. I mean, he knows that.
Yeah,
And he
yeah,
said it's that silly, um, slow emptying that you have with your achalasia. And I asked my GI doc, I go, in the event I would like to have something in some cosmetic procedure in the future, and you're not there, what do I do? And he said, here's my
yeah.
tip for that: lay all achalasia patients on their side and not on their
Mm,
back. And he said it
interesting.
will help avoid that,
Yeah,
because I sure
makes
did
sense.
bring up something from 22 hours ago, at least, maybe 24, but that's how slow my
Yeah,
my emptying is, similar to gastroparesis, though gastroparesis, mine's not comparable. They have a lot of pain, they have a lot of nausea. It affects every decision of their lives. Can I travel
yes,
today? Can I do things? I don't have that. So my point
yeah,
is, too, if you think that this drug may give you gastroparesis, I would I would think hard long. And is that
yeah.
while you're taking the drug, or does it go away if you stop the drug, then you have weight rebound?
They've seen some people it goes away, and they've seen some people it stays. It affects the nerve that,
Oh, it's
yeah. So
bad.
again,
Yeah.
why take the risk unless you absolutely have no choice? That's how I see it. If you're so morbidly obese and you have so many medical problems, then yes, this might
Yeah.
be a good solution for
Yeah.
you. But
Yeah.
if not, why take the risk of all these other long-term complications? And we don't even know. I mean, yes, they've been around for a while, but
We don't know.
the thyroid
Mm-mm.
cancer one is a little bit scary. Why even risk it, right?
Right.
So,
Well, let's segue then, since I confessed that I had a procedure done on my face, and it's the same thing you've talked about, the Morpheus 8.
yeah,
And so I don't know if you have to be, and I wasn't under general, I was under whatever that light, the lighter
yeah.
anesthesia is. But tell me about, you've got the virtual peel you could do at home. Tell me more.
So I'm all about feeling good, but looking good too, right?
Yeah.
So I do incorporate Morpheus 8 in my practice, which you already know about, but
Yeah.
I love things that are kind of natural, or at least like close to as natural as you can get. So Morpheus 8 stimulates your body to build collagen by creating these little injuries from microneedling and radio frequency, which is heat that's kind of released underneath your skin. I always tell people, like, think about a chicken, like a raw chicken that's kind of flabby when you first have it, right? But then you cook it, and what happens? It like tightens because all that heat
Oh,
tightened it up.
that's
Well,
good.
you're
Yeah.
kind of doing the same thing, right? But it's
Mhm.
underneath your skin, and you're not scarring the skin, so it does cause some tightening. But the virtual peel was actually born during COVID. It was kind of, I was like, huh, people aren't coming to the office. You can't really do these procedures. So it's basically a chemical peel that you can do with me virtually. So, for example, just like we're speaking right now,
Oh,
if you want to do the
yes.
virtual peel, I'll mail it to you. Obviously, we go through, you sign a consent to make sure that you don't have any issues taking it. And then we do a step by step where I show you how to do it virtually, like we're doing now. And you apply it, we apply it together, and I tell you what you need to do and what you need to worry about. And then in, 6 to 7 days, you're peeling. So there you go, virtual peel.
Unbelievable. So you're in Manhattan, right? You're in the city.
Hmm. Yeah,
So can you do that across state lines?
I can do that anywhere in the US. Yeah, I've shipped
Oh,
my virtual peel to so many people where we do it right just like this. So,
unbelievable. So is
yep.
that at fromwithinmedical.com, your website?
Yeah. Yeah. So, or they can contact me on Instagram too. I have, they can DM me, and we have you sign a consent, and we mail it out
Yeah.
to you. And then when you're ready to schedule, we schedule it together.
Okay. And that
So,
all of your information will be in the show notes. Your name, it says your wellness and weight loss coach, which is part of your social media. Your social media is great.
thank
In
you.
getting people just the education. Because I think COVID was a bad time, especially for people like me who are freedom seekers and want autonomy and all that, right? I mean, we know that.
Yeah.
But what
Yeah.
it did do was it equipped us to do some things, like I would have never thought we could do a virtual peel at home. But it equipped, that's when I got my health coaching certification from the Institute of Integrated Nutrition in New York. did it virtually. And the things that
Yep.
we were able to do, because as an extrovert who has a lot of energy, COVID was boring. Like I didn't
Yes.
enjoy the time. I didn't enjoy that people wanted to sit around
Yeah.
watching The Office. I was not that person.
Yep.
But I think it equipped us too to become educated on
Agree.
what's going on, what's really going on. And that's why I think part of our division in this country isn't just political, and maybe this falls under political. I don't want it to, but it's
Yeah.
just freedom seekers and
Yep.
the others. I mean, I hate to say it, but
I completely agree with you. You know, my office was kind of closed because it was not considered essential. But
I
that's
think it's
where we
essential.
started doing research
Yeah.
on COVID and the gut, and that's where we
Oh,
kind of came to that discovery. And believe it or not, I was so naive before 2020, and that was a big wake up call for me because our study was something that we thought could help so many people, and nobody wanted to report on it. We'd send it to all these media outlets and they would say, wow, this is amazing. We're going to send it to our science department. And then you'd never hear from them again. And I was like,
it,
this is so odd because we're not recommending rat poison. We're recommending a probiotic with this bacteria that's been,
wow.
protecting children. And so that, again, like you said, we all educated ourselves. We were all able to see more clearly. And so what I would suggest to anyone listening is, yes, it's okay to listen to doctors and health authorities, but also use your critical thinking skills that you've been,
Hmm.
given, and do your
Hmm.
own research and find out what's best for your body. So.
Well, to me, it's obvious with yours. Yours wasn't brought to you by Pfizer. That, brought to you by SmithKline Beecham. Brought to you by,
Yeah,
and
brought
because
to you by
that's
your
why people,
body.
yeah, right. That's it. That's who sponsored it. No, that doctor asked me about the impact factor of the study, and I'd never heard that term. And maybe that's what she was using to weigh, the fact that I'm coming in going, I want a lot of vitamin D. Like I'm a dealer.
Yeah.
I want a lot of vitamin D. But
Yeah.
the fact that we do have this at our fingertips now, and I want to put that study in the show notes because you learned from that by having this type of bacteria that is this where you deduce that children don't die from COVID?
Yes.
Because
Yep.
they have high levels of the bifidobacterium.
Yeah. Yeah. It was another light bulb moment. My husband's an ICU
Wow.
doctor, and he happened to see these people who were really sick in his ICU, and they had these high
Oh,
inflammatory markers.
yes.
And I
Yes.
started digging a little bit more because I was thinking to myself, what's going on? Kids aren't getting sick at all. And then when we started digging deep and looking at the gut, we found that kids' guts, 60 to 80% of their gut bacteria is that one bacteria, bifidobacterium. So I was like, okay, maybe this is a coincidence. Let's dig a little deeper. But when we did dig deeper, every time we would find more information about this bacteria, it was like, this fits, this all fits. This bacteria was down regulating the same pathways that we were seeing people with COVID severity were having,
Wow.
which is an immune pathway called interleukin 6. I'm not going to get into it deeply, but it's called interleukin 6, which is a pro-inflammatory released mediator by our body. And that was really, really high in people who were really sick. But guess what down regulates interleukin 6? Bifidobacterium. That's one of its functions. It's a very potent immune
Unbelievable.
regulator. And I'll tell you something else. Ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, initially, when they were looking at those studies, they found that they lowered interleukin 6. But what we didn't realize was how they were lowering interleukin 6. And the reason they were lowering interleukin 6, believe it or not, there's a GI doctor named Dr. Sabine Hazan who did a study on ivermectin, and she found that the way that they are lowering interleukin 6 is by increasing bifidobacterium levels in the gut. So again,
Now
it was like another breakthrough moment where
okay,
we kind of
that
put
is
two and two together.
that is criminal to me. That type of information, the fact that those of us that were saying get sunlight, stop
Yep.
eating crap,
Vitamin
go to
D.
bed
Yep.
earlier. Yeah,
Yep.
all those things that were
Yeah.
free, that cost you nothing. You don't have to take a vitamin D
Exactly.
supplement. You have it in your front
Exactly.
yard. Those
Exactly.
things, and I'm a journalist. So for me to say, I gave up watching TV March
Yeah.
10th, 2020, I grew up in the news business. I've not
Yeah.
turned it back on because they lied to me in the beginning. So I know it just got worse. So, oh,
I'm
That
with
kind of
you.
stuff makes my
I don't
skin
even
crawl.
watch the news anymore. I have lost faith in our healthcare system. I was so naive before, and now I say, you know what? I'm not putting anything in my body unless I research it. And you said it perfectly. It's free. Getting a probiotic with this bacteria has never killed one single human being. In fact, they give
Right.
they give it to babies in the neonatal ICU because their guts aren't properly,
Is that
developed
right?
yet. They give it to them for a lot of factors. And it's not even a new bacteria that it was found in the early 1900s by a microbiologist. I'll send you information on this. It was a fascinating discovery. And this microbiologist started writing all these articles about how it was helping with longevity. And we've seen this bacteria in higher levels in people who live to be 100. I mean, there are so many studies. If you just Google bifidobacterium on the internet, you'll find so many studies. And it's not a coincidence that children have it, because when they're born, they need a little bit of a stronger and more robust immune system because they haven't had the access to the dirt and the environment to build
Right.
up that
Right.
adaptive immune system. So it's like nature's way of giving them a little bit of a boost. And that boost just happened to be the exact mediator of the immune pathways that COVID affected. And that's why they didn't get sick. Because as soon as they developed COVID or they were infected with COVID, their immune system went into overdrive. They had so much of that bacteria, it immediately downregulated all those pathways that were being released that were causing inflammation. And they were able to mount a really quick and adequate response. And that's why they didn't get sick. So, and
Unbelievable.
that's why certain people died. They were deficient completely in bifidobacterium. And I'll risk my medical reputation till the day I die saying this. And I'm a very cautious person, but I'm very confident in the fact that that was the difference between life and death in COVID.
Christine, you're a great guest. I mean,
Thank you.
you are an outstanding guest. I love your research. I love your sensibility. In
Thank
fact,
you.
you're in a state and a city that hasn't been kind to the way you think and you're freedom seeking. So I really respect that, because a lot of your people went south to Florida because I interview a lot of them. They're like, oh, I was in New York, but wasn't working for me. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for doing this interview. All the information about you is in our show notes, and everybody, let's go eat a banana. Let's go eat some asparagus.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Lisa Fisher Said podcast. Be sure to hit subscribe and download all the episodes and leave a review, won't you? The Lisa Fisher Said podcast is produced by ClantonCreative.com.